Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Irene Campolmi and I'm a researcher and a curator based in Copenhagen, though working and living in transit at least prior to the pandemic. My current research investigates post-colonial, queer and feminist theories through performance and artistic hybrid ecologies. And the title of my presentation today, or my sort of like bunch of reflections, I would say, it's called A Space of Intimacy, Reflections on Performance and Duration Post-Pandemic. The title of this talk brings the homonymous title that I gave to the first performance program that I could curate this summer. I was probably one of the lucky curators that could develop a project that I've been working for an entire year. And of course, my main concern had been how do I bring the reflections, the concerns, the ideas that I developed during the lockdown in a moment in which we were not even sure how the future would have, the nearby future would have looked like in a program that I curate. So the whole idea is, for me had been how a medium like performance, which is the main medium that I'm working with, how would it change as a medium primarily based on intimacy and the understanding of time and space in its subversion. How would it react? How it would adapt in a moment in which we cannot gather anymore physically? And at the same time, I sort of try to also reverse the question, what can we learn from performance as a testing ground for experimenting new way of existing and also new way of thinking? So the idea of creating of reflecting on intimacy, intimacy is a word came from the fact that intimacy is a word used to primarily address the feeling of closeness and proximity between a few number of people. And this could either be physical or it could be spiritual or intellectual. Performing arts are in some cases able to activate both, but within context in which more than one people gather at the same time and for the same purpose, which is to look at a performance. So the space of a performance is, whether this is a theater, a bunker, a park, or a museum, it is a space of intimacy. It's a space that it is a space that become a connectors between words and people who would not necessarily mean, but who would get to share a very intimate space where a catharsis take place and a transformation, take place. It's hard to predict what is the future of the social distancing regulation in the art sector, but at the same time, I do believe that what happened within the past the past months is that performance as a medium detached from, or at least took a strong separation from what has been considered the event economy. And thinking about event, I've been reflecting about the etymology of the word, which comes from Latin eventus, that is the past participle of the verb evenire, and that namely means coming from the outside. An event in its original meaning, it is something that happens without control from within, and only something that is imposed from the outside. But if we think about the origins, about the essence of performance, is it something that happens only within, or not necessarily, but it is at the very beginning. It happens within the body of the performance, within the space in which these performers encounter the audience. It happens within the mind of the audience. So by thinking about like this and this, the internal, development of any performance is so much associated to duration and to an understanding of time that really subverts the normative understanding of time. Duration, in fact, is something that happens when we dilatates time. It can happen in a split of a second or in days or years, but it happens when, in relation to performance, when it manipulates, it subverts conventional understanding of time and space. So during the lockdown, we have definitely all experienced how Jitsi and Zoom and other digital platform could recreate a sense of intimacy even in the lack of the physical encounter. And at the same time, we all experience that time is something that we inhabit, it's something that we pass through. If we don't make a moment different from the other in a qualitative term, there is no perception of the quantity of the extension, and in this reason also, like, the language around time is a bit weird, and it's a bit something that we might want to rethink. If we say constantly that a lot of time has passed, or was it just a short time, whereas actually we pass through time. We are the one that are mining every different moment. And one artist that I've been in a long conversation with, Miles Greenberg, has been reflecting about this understanding of time as a extension, as a stretching time, I would say, as a devising strategy to create performative situation that wouldn't be necessarily something to see, but something to stand within. So in the physical encounter of the body of the bodies in the spaces, in the architectures that the artist Miles Greenberg recreate, the visitors are invited to perceive time as a durational physical encounter rather than simply a moment that passes. I've met his work in 2019 when he presented a performance cycle called Alphaville Noir during the opening of La Manutención, the performance program that is held at the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, during which artists are invited to present their work in different evenings throughout the duration of a month or so. When for the first time Miles and I entered in conversation, we wanted to create a work that would somehow bring this stretched time within a space that, as an art program of an art fair, that doesn't necessarily convene it. So the idea was to create a still performance, an architecture that that would host this performance situation, that would incorporate time, and that would involve also some living tissues that would, all in all, create a very strong different reaction in the viewer about time and about how to move through it. The performance that you see it now was based and constructed around an aquarium, 2 meters per 1.6, that would become this devising expedient. You know, an aquarium is an object, is an architecture that invites someone else, named the viewer, to look inside, to objectify the subject that is placed within the aquarium. So the idea is to look at something and to impose a gaze. And the understanding of the artist was actually to create a score, if you want to call it like that, in which two young performers that would have never met before would enter the aquarium without rehearsing previously, and keep an embrace with this contrapposto position, this equipose that really reminds the Western sculptural canons. One could think about all the Neo-Roman and Greek statues, but at the same time also the more recent or contemporary artists like Rodin. Definitely, we see something of a Western sculptural language that is, of course, used to subvert, to sort of work within this language to activate a critical reflection. And in fact, these two bodies in this aquarium become objectified. They become the trigger that sort of like confronts the white viewer with its cultural colonial view, for which the black bodies is or at least is seen as the other, is seen as something that is totally objectified. So what Miles actually also wanted to use was to create a devising object that would be a sort of panopticon, no? That would erase the a way of viewing performance as frontally, would encourage to see the work from different perspectives, and at the same time to invite the viewers to look around, to find their path of their own experience of looking, and somehow individualizing every performance. Basically, the performance will be different from depending on how everyone of among the viewers would move around it. So in a way, also the body of the performers was both intensely present and at the same time already a trace. If we want to use like the art historian Carrie Lambert Beatty, it was already a performance that once it is photographed, as you can see it here, it is already becoming a structuring paradox. And to quote the artist, he used to say that I'm trying to meet people where they are. My ideal way of viewing art is to enter the Louvre with and to look at to see this body on pedestal and having the sensation of quietude and anonymity. Unquote. Human anatomy is very touching to me and also very romantic, and this is a feeling that I want to replicate. The idea was in fact that the artist and the performers are completely sort of detached from the outside by wearing this white contact lenses that prevent them to see what is happening outside. So sort of like isolation that would allow them to keep a gesture, to keep still, to do not be affected by what's happening around there. And in this situation, the artist had been able to create a sort of infinite gesture, where the intimacy between the human subject and the artistic object would become ground zero, a moment in which stillness would be at the center of the work, and stillness somehow is also what is presented here, but also the illusion of it. Because the work neither embraces nor refuses narrative, but instead it prolongs the viewer perception of it. It is impossible to anticipate where the work is going, but at the same time, the experience becomes an accumulation of here and now. And of course, his work can be viewed in relation to performative works that from Maria Arsabi to Alexandra Perici, just to mention a few of them, as I've worked with rational performance as a stretching of time rather than a sort of than a reflection on endurance or fight or struggle. All these artists like create performances or reflect on time, on the time of the performance as something that is suspended from the conventional understanding. And by doing that, they allow the viewer to enter all of a sudden in contact with this, with an unconventional understanding of time. I want to quote here a colleague and a scholar in performance, Andrea Lepecki, who's also part of this series of lectures, that really offers an interesting aspect and take on that. When he says that duration is not time extended, but is actually that is nothing to do or very little to do with other special references. He by quoting Henri Bergson in Time and Free Will, book from 1889, he says that duration is about actually essence. It's about a very particular experience of time. And essence is a philosophy of becoming. It's something that that allows us to understand duration and therefore performance as something that is unceasingly being done. So durational performance is probably the name that we would be interested to sort of adopt whenever we refer to performance per se, and never anymore to the word event. Because every performance is durational, not for lasting or such a long time or for lasting such a short time, but because it subverts and it subdues the chrono-normative time by proposing also another understanding of, of a situation in which there are no metrics, no measure of time. And as soon as these movements are, and these gestures are taken outside of the economy of the impatience of the patients and the economy of expectations, as soon as there are no accounting subjects to which we relate, then we find duration in its heterogeneously, singular act. And for this reason, I found very educative, and in a way also very inspiring to work with Miles, because his understanding of performance is quite like a Buddhist principle, open-ended ritual, where there is no beginning and no end, where there is no birth and sort of no death. And to quote also in the sense Lepeki, when the doing is about undoing a measured time. So if stillness has been the score of this performance, what I've learned is that stillness has also been, in a way, the word that has crucially created the scores of our more or less imposed or advised periods of lockdown and quarantine. And I found that the way in which performance work with time is, so to say, not only inspirational but also useful, if we want to talk in these terms, because performance is a ground where we can test, experiment, and try out new ways of existing, new ways of perceiving, not only as curators, as artists, but also as audience, and to basically learn how to be present and yet still. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks so much for being present but still. Thanks.